Happy Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. I really hope you're in a warm place. I got up this morning here in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and it was 4 degrees. I want to tell you, for us, that's highly unusual. I can tell you that I really enjoyed my fireplace last night. Stoked it up real well before I left, and I may go home and hug the fireplace today. Boy, it's just cold, and I'm not a cold weather person. Now, I know there are some of you who watch the videos who live in the northern regions and who have contacted me and said, hey, it's 20 below, it's 30, it's 40 degrees below. Well, this kid is not interested. Sorry. I'm not a cold weather person. Well, anyway, welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute. And we are examining the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15, and we're doing so by comparing it with Romans chapters 5 to 8. These are directly parallel passages. We have been focused over the last several videos on Paul's statement in 1 Corinthians 15:56 that the resurrection would be when sin, the sting of death, would be overcome. Very simply, what that means is, as I have shared with you repeatedly, if you deal with sin, you've dealt with death. Now, to demonstrate that and to drive that home, we've been examining Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8 tells us, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, who do not walk after the flesh, but after the Spirit. Well, for Paul, condemnation was death. I was alive once without the law. The commandment came, sin revived, and I died. Very clearly, he had not died biologically. He had been, however, condemned by the law. This is the condemnation. This is the life and death that is in Paul's discussion in Romans chapter 8. The point of this being that whereas Paul says the resurrection would be when sin, the sting of death, would be overcome, Paul says life would be and was taking place as a result of being in Christ, where there is no condemnation of sin. Now, in the last video, I shared with you what Paul says in Romans chapter 8 and verse 10. If, and that means if and only if, Christ is in you, the body is dead. I pointed out that this simply cannot be referring to biological life and death. And any number of people responded, both privately and on YouTube and Facebook, trying to say, well, what Paul means here, if Christ is in you, the body is subject to death, but because of the Spirit we have life. Well, first of all, that introduces biological death into the context where Paul has never mentioned biological death. That's called eisegesis. Remember, Paul said, I was alive, commandment came, sin revived, I died. Not biological death. Romans 7:24, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? Paul wasn't longing to be free from the biological body. Romans 8:1, no condemnation to those who are in Christ. The law of the Spirit of life has made me free from the law of sin and death. I ask you again, if it is the case that the law of sin and death means you sin, you die biologically, then Paul was saying unequivocally that to be in Christ is to be free from the law of biological death. That is patently false, but that is the conclusion that must be drawn if one inserts biological death into the context. Paul is not saying, okay, well, if Christ is in you, you're going to die, but if Christ is in you, you'll also live. While that may be a solution that has been offered multitudinous times. Once again, that is not what Paul is talking about, because he has never mentioned physical death in this entire discussion. And remember, if and only if Christ is in you. And I know this is one of those if and only if situations, pardon me, because he goes ahead to say, if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life. Okay, so this is not one of those situations where he's talking hypothetically. He is saying, if and only if Christ dwells in you, the body is dead. In other words, the body is not dead if Christ does not dwell. Now, what this absolutely means is, if we are, I tell you, when you look closely at the traditional views of Paul's discussion of life and death and body and resurrection, etc., it presents all sorts of problems. Since Paul is unequivocally, undeniably, and irrefutably saying, if and only if Christ dwells in you, the body is dead. Now remember, can't be talking about biological body. Is it not the case? Listen to me carefully and catch the power of this. Is it not the case that as in Adam all men die? 1 Corinthians 15:22. Is it not the case of, wherefore as by one man sin entered the world, and death through sin? Romans 5:12. In other words, according to the traditional paradigms, it is because of Adam that we die. It is because of Adam that the biological body dies. Okay. Has that now changed to where we now say, well, we don't die biologically because of Adam. Now we die biologically because of Jesus? Really? Are we under the sentence of two deaths? The death of Adam, biological, and now the death of Christ, biological? Folks, it makes no sense whatsoever. But if we take the body here to be the body of death of Romans 7:24, if we take it to be the old man of Romans 6:5 and 6, if we take it to be the body of sin of Romans 6:5 and 6, then that is exactly, perfectly, pardon me, harmonious with Paul's thought. Paul is saying that old body is dead if Christ dwells in you. You're putting the old man, the old body, away. It is dead if Christ dwells in you, but if Christ dwells in you, you have life. We just simply cannot overemphasize the fact that it is impossible contextually to insert biological death into the text, or else you create two biological deaths, one through Adam, one through Christ. But more critically, even than that, if you could get more critical than that, is the reality that the body and the sin and the death that Paul has been dealing with throughout is, in fact, the body of sin, death. That by being in Christ, that body was dying. And they were being raised to life. And that life can be ours today, by the way. Life. Wow. Life in Christ. If you want more, you need to get a copy of this great little book, The Last Enemy and the Triumph of Christ, by Daniel Rogers. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and order this book. As I have said before many times, very easy reading, very easy to be understood. You will see very clearly, perhaps for the very first time, how Paul is dealing with Adam's sin and death, Christ, righteousness, and life. And yes, indeed, we've got more. So we'll see you on the flip side.